Howdy, y'all. I'm Paula Deen, and I want y'all to get ready to hit the road because today's show is all about food that I've tasted in my travels around the country. And first of all, from Florida, I'm gonna be cooking up a rich and creamy, smoky mushroom soup. Then from Texas, I'm gonna be heating up the griddle, and I'm gonna make some chicken fried steak with the most divine gravy, and then I'm gonna ladle it all over my fresh out of the oven, mouth-watering biscuits that have been baked up Carolina style. So y'all take a seat, fasten your belt, and enjoy the ride, cause I got some delicious recipes coming up ahead. That never traveled much. I've been on the road a whole bunch just lately. And that's what today's show is about. It's all about that road food. You know, being on the road or going on vacation, 3/4 of the fun is the food. And that's what we're gonna be doing today. And I'm gonna show y'all probably my all-time favorite smoky cream of mushroom soup that I just fell in love with when I was down in Florida visiting this restaurant. You can smoke your portobello a couple of different ways. You can do it on a grill over an open fire with wood, using wood to give it that wonderful smoky flavor, or you can do the way that I opted to do mine, which is a real shortcut. And I have just taken my whole portobello and I coated it in a little olive oil, just rub him like that. And to that, I'm gonna add just a little liquid smoke. And I mean very small amount of liquid smoke. But that's gonna give it the flavor that the wood would have given you had we done it outside. And I'm just gonna put these in a dish, sprinkle them with a little bit more olive oil, and then I'm gonna just roast them off in the oven. And I've got my smoked portobello. And this is what they'll look like. All right. So the recipe is 4 regular portobellos and 4 that's been smoked. And now I'm just gonna rough chop this portobello and add it to the others. So this will give me 4 natural portobellos. There we go. And I'm gonna do the same thing to these mushrooms. Just gonna rough chop them. Look at the texture. Okay, so I've got a 1/2 cup of onions that have been sauteed off in a little olive oil. And now I'm gonna take our mushrooms and throw them in here with our onions. And I'm gonna use 1½ teaspoons of fresh minced garlic. Okay, so we're just gonna saute that off just for a minute. All right, now I have 1/4 cup of wine that I'm gonna pour over those mushrooms. And in goes our 8 cups of chicken stock. I'm gonna let it come to a boil, put a lid on it, and let it simmer for about 20 minutes. Now, we don't have 20 minutes, so I have a pot that's already ready, that's cooked the 20 minutes, so I'm gonna just switch that out because I want y'all to see how this looks. The mushrooms have shrunk. I'm gonna take my little whipper dipper machine and I'm gonna insert it into the soup and I'm gonna puree those mushrooms, onions, and garlic. Sounds like I'm cutting the hedge, doesn't it? Well, I just pure like that, y'all. Now, what I'm gonna do next is make a white roux for our cream of mushroom soup. I'm gonna use a stick of butter and a 1/2 cup of flour. And when I say a white roux, that means I'm not gonna let that flour brown. I'm just gonna incorporate the butter and the flour together. All right, now our butter's melted, and I'm gonna add our flour, and that's a 1/2 cup. Okay, you'll want to make sure that while you're preparing your roux, that you mash out any lumps that might be in there, because we don't want our soup to be lumpy. We want it to be very smooth. All right. So I'm going to add our roux to our mushroom mixture. And that stick of butter is not going to do one thing to hurt the flavor of this soup. Now I'm going to add our 1 quart of heavy cream to this, and I'm going to let it cook for about 20 more minutes. Oh, that's looking mighty fine. All right. We're getting very, very close. And when we come back, this beautiful soup should be ready to sample. And then I'm going to be making the king of all road foods, chicken fried steak, gravy, and biscuits. Honey Hush. Welcome back, y'all. This smoky prima mushroom soup is, I think, just perfect. This is only one food that you'll find when you're out there on those road trips. There's another one if you've ever visited a diner, and that's chicken fried steak and biscuits and gravy. And I'm gonna start by taking 1 envelope, 1 small package of yeast, and dissolving it in a 1/2 cup of warm water. And I'm gonna put that in there and let that bloom while I'm putting everything else together. Now I have 5 cups of all-purpose flour, and to that flour I'm gonna add 1 teaspoon of baking soda. I'm gonna add 1 tablespoon of baking powder, 2 tablespoons of sugar. Because our flour is an all-purpose, I'm gonna add a little bit more than just a pinch of salt. I'm gonna add about a 1/2 teaspoon. Now I'm just gonna mix those dry ingredients together, just like that. And now I'm gonna take 3/4 a cup of a solid shortening. Now if you wanna make a true old-timey Southern biscuit, you can use lard. Lard makes the best biscuits and the best flaky pie crust. And I'm just gonna cut this shortening into our flour until it resembles like a coarse ground meal. Now that gets that, I've cut that in nice and evenly. All right, now our yeast has bloomed, and I'm gonna dump this into our flour, and then I'm gonna add 2 cups of buttermilk. And I'm not gonna add it all at once. I'm gonna just start working that flour slowly in to that milk and that yeast. All right, now I'm gonna add some more of this milk. In fact, I'm gonna go ahead and add the rest of it. And this is a great recipe that can give you the flavor of yeast, but doesn't require all the rising and all that stuff. You know, it's not gonna be drug out over, 2 or 3 hours of rising, punching it down, letting it rise again. We're gonna do this in one fell swoop. All right, now I'm gonna put a generous amount of flour on my cutting board. I'm just gonna roll this dough out onto that flour. I'm gonna sprinkle a little bit more flour on top, and then I'm gonna knead it. Oh, and that yeast smell, I just adore that smell. Now, as I told you, today is all about road trips and eating all that fabulous food that you might not necessarily eat at home. Now you can roll these biscuits out to the thickness that you like them. I'm going to use a medium-sized cutter. Now you know you can't have chicken fried steak without a biscuit. So that's why I'm making these. How beautiful do those look? And of course, to make my biscuits look really homemade, I like to come through and press them down or take my knuckles and press those down. Now, before I put these in the oven, I'm gonna brush them with a melted butter, and I'm gonna bake them at 400 for about 12 minutes. So that's going in the oven next. So let's come on down here and taste that cream of mushroom soup. I wanna show you how this was served. All right, let's see. I think I can just pour that without making a mess. Now you can serve this in one big serving bowl, or you can put it in individual serving bowls. The way this was presented to us was a little dollop of sour cream in the center, sprinkled with onions, the green onion tops, a few croutons, and crumbled bacon. Look how good that looks. And of course, if you're not a big meat eater, you can certainly do away with the bacon. That's truly optional, but you know, in Paula world, if it's an option and involves bacon, you know that I'm gonna use it. Delicious, y'all. Hard to believe that just last weekend I was down in Florida eating this. Y'all stick around because when we come back, I'm gonna make some chicken fried steak to go along with those light and fluffy yeast biscuits that I just got through making. So I'll see y'all back in a minute. Y'all come on over here and stick your head in this oven. I want you to see the most beautiful biscuits that you have ever seen in your life. Look at this. I love the way a biscuit cooks in a cast iron pan. Oh, it's heavy though and it's hot. Look at that, y'all. Look at those biscuits. Look at that. Oh, I can't hardly wait to butter them and eat them along with this gravy. Well, let's move on because the next thing I'm fixing to make is a chicken fried steak. This is one of these dishes, whether you're in Millbrook, New York, or you're in Albany, Georgia, or Savannah, Georgia, you're gonna find a chicken fried steak on the menu. Now, I've got two different bowls up here. I've got one full of flour, and I'm gonna fill one with buttermilk. And I'm gonna take our steak, and your steak is nothing but a round steak that you have had your butcher run it through a cuber, and it breaks the meat down because round steak is not typically a tender cut of meat. So it has to have some help in breaking down that meat so that it will get tender. Now I'm gonna take our steak and I'm just gonna sprinkle it with house seasoning, and then I'm gonna run it through the buttermilk and then into the flour. And that buttermilk is gonna help it have a nice heavy crust on it. I probably got about a ½ inch of grease, and it's not gonna take long for this steak to cook at all. So let's start by sampling a piece, and yeah, that's good. In fact, that might just be perfect. All right, let's look at our steak now because it's probably ready to flip. Yes, it is. And you'll want to do this gently so that your crust doesn't fall off because you want every bit of that crust. All right. While that steak is finishing up and it's about ready, I'm gonna move the biscuits down here and I'm gonna take the steak up and I'm gonna let it drain for a second on a paper towel. And now I'm gonna make that delicious white milk gravy that we love down here. I'm gonna ever so gently walk this down to the deep fryer, and I'm just gonna pour this into my fryer and hold me back just enough grease to make my gravy. And that's gonna be a couple of tablespoons. Okay. So there we go, our pan's nice and hot. And I'm probably adding a couple of tablespoons of flour. Now to our flour and leftover drippings, I'm gonna add a little salt. And this is the ingredient that I do love in white milk gravy, and that's coarse ground black pepper. All right, now I'm gonna add some sweet milk. Sweet milk is Southern talk for just plain old whole milk. And I don't know how much of this milk it's gonna take, but I had out a quart, and I'm down to about a cup and a half left. That looks just perfect. Look at that piece of chicken fried steak. Isn't that yummy looking? Mmm. And now I'm gonna drizzle that gravy on top of those biscuits. And then I'm gonna come over here and get me just a little bit of gravy for that chicken fried steak. And just because I need something green on that plate, I'm gonna stick a couple of green onions on it. How yummy does that look? Mmm. Mmm. This is so good. It just screams America. No matter where you go, you can find this comforting dish. So coming up next, I'm gonna be shooting oysters. Not like in the water, but this way. You know, my family and I love to go on road trips along the coast so that we can sample all the oysters. And there's many, many ways to eat an oyster. Well, I want to share with y'all a few ways to enjoy a raw oyster, not necessarily on the half shell. I love to do oyster shooters. The first way I'm going to show you, that's dropping an oyster in a shot glass, topping it with a little cocktail sauce and a squirt of lemon, and you just kick it back. The next way you could do it is by pouring a little vodka on it. And you do the same thing, a little cocktail sauce and a little squirt of lemon. Now the last way you can enjoy an oyster shooter is cover it with a little tomato juice, a little hot sauce, and a squirt of lime. And that gives you 3 more ways to enjoy this fabulous fruit from our sea. You know, the most fun about road trips or vacations as far as that goes is the food. And these are some wonderful foods that you're gonna run up on out there on your road trip. You know, hit that diner and taste that chicken fried steak and biscuits and gravy, or that wonderful creamy mushroom soup. And don't miss enjoying some fresh oysters, whether you like them fried or to shoot them. They are delicious. So the moral of this show is, if you just can't squeeze in a road trip, at least you can fix these dishes at home. You can go jump in the car, sit in the yard, and just pretend like you're on a road trip. So, as always, I'm gonna send you my love and best dishes from my kitchen to yours. So long.